Y'all seen this shit. So for those who've been living under a rock or not on Twitter, which is fair enough, there's an episode of Moon Girl and Double Dinosaur that is being held back by Disney themselves. Why? Well, because the episode itself focuses on a transgender character in the show named Brooklyn, and because the political climate in the US right now has shifted with the election of Donald Trump. Disney allegedly doesn't want to take any risks and air the episode. And I feel like if anything, this is the perfect opportunity to talk about Disney's history of protecting their pockets when it comes to these kinds of issues. Also, look at their Patreon, link in the description.
They were the only light in the darkness of me having to play on the boys' team.
Boys' team?
The episode in question is titled The Gatekeeper, and the plot is essentially about Brooklyn, the captain of the volleyball team, facing a challenge in the form of an opposing team's coach, Coach Creer. After learning that Brooklyn was assigned male at birth, she completely loses it and confronts the coach of the other team about this. Realizing that literally nobody except her cares, she takes matters into her own hands and locks the whole team in a locker room so that they can't show up to play the match. The only method of escaping is playing by her rules, quote unquote, going through a series of challenges to collect 20 keys and unlock the door. Now, before going into any of the controversy surrounding the actual episode, the quality of the episode is actually very good in my opinion. I like a lot of Brooklyn's lines in this episode. At the start of it, she feels confident and assured of herself, her identity, and her abilities as the captain and an athlete in general. Her interactions with Coach Kreese always end up with Kreese on the perceived losing end, having her get upset. But as the episode progresses and she has to take on the challenge of collecting the 20 keys, not only for herself but for her entire team, we can actually see the mental toll that it starts to take on her slowly increase. And when the plot twist near the end happens and it looks like all hope is lost, we get some very hard-hitting lines.
To get out, you must follow my rules. I'm trans. My very existence breaks Greer's rules, which means as long as I'm a member of this team, we'll never escape. This is all my fault.
This episode's main themes are not only about accepting who you are, but also the challenges that a trans person like Brooklyn would face, such as feeling like a burden to those around her for the attention she gets, as well as having certain opportunities limited to you because of what you identify as. The dialogue is probably my favorite part of the episode because they never try to shy away or use any incredibly subliminal lines for you to see what the episode is actually about. The characters are fully aware of the situation they're in and it's played completely straight. Pun intended. I also enjoyed the feeling of togetherness that this episode has, as through all of the challenges that they face, the team always has each other's backs, especially Brooklyn. She's a ride or die for her team, and vice versa. Even in little moments in the episode, like after their initial confrontation with Kreese. The visuals also really complemented this episode. Not only was it filled with the typical Moon Girl magic that you would come to expect, but just to hammer the point home, you can find the trans flag and colors in a lot of places here. Just for good measure. The episode was leaked and put onto the Internet Archive, to which I'll put a link in the description, so you can go watch it for yourself. There's so much positive messaging in this episode, and the story itself is so good that despite this episode not even coming out officially, it's quickly becoming one of the most highly rated episodes of the show. Speaking of that though, now I have to address the elephant in the room, that being Disney and its usual corporate fuckery. First off, this isn't the first time that Disney has done something like this to protect their bottom line. You can point to Alex Hirsch and his story on Gravity Falls censorship in general, particularly with the Love God episode and character, where one of his necklaces had the intersex symbol as a pendant, which Disney forced him to remove. There's also the case of the two cops in the show being heavily watered down because they were in fact gay. And probably the craziest instance to me would be the animators in Inside Out 2 being told that Riley looked quote-unquote too gay. That shit is wild. A lot of people would also point to the cancelling of the Owl House as an example of this behavior, but to be fair, if you had more than 2 brain cells, you know that it was actually cancelled because Disney doesn't like serialized shows, unlike some YouTubers would have you believe. But what gets to me in this specific scenario is that it's Moon Girl that's getting this treatment and having a whole episode shelved. One of the most disrespected shows not only by Disney but by the community at large. I'm looking at you niggas. I remember when this show first dropped and all the big YouTubers who usually look at new drops were quiet about it. And the YouTubers that did talk about it did not get the reception that many other shows would have gotten despite being one of the best, no debate. On top of that, when it comes to good representation, shows like Moon Girl are streets ahead of a lot of shows, and this episode is streets ahead of a lot of episodes about this topic. Leave it to this show to make one of the best episodes this year, and leave it to Disney to just hold it back for reasons. This issue extends outside of this episode, and just in general says a lot about Disney's attitude towards the show, and shows that have representation like this in general. Barely any advertising and marketing, dumping the entire first season at once, leaving no hype for it. Again, it honestly doesn't surprise me at this point. And since everyone is aware that Disney are essentially posers when it comes to topics like LGBT, it shouldn't surprise anyone that they would do something like this to protect their pockets. While I am still fuming that people are only now talking about the show when its fate is basically sealed, it's been great to see people actually giving the show some of the flowers it deserves. Again, not the most desirable circumstances, and some part of me knows that once this whole controversy dies down, people will go back to sleeping on the show. It's still nice. But yeah, that's all I have to say about the situation. Let me know what you think. Comment down below. Do all the good stuff. Have a good day, and take care.